Satellite radio. He's kind of everywhere. Andy, what's up, man?
I am, and I was supposed to be on earlier, and then I got called in to do a shift on Sirius XM, so I appreciate you guys moving me around.
Kind of you to spend a few minutes with us. So much conversation today about Lane Kiffin, Ole Miss, Auburn, all of that. I'm curious, as somebody who has covered the SEC for a long time, but also has I feel like you got a pretty keen understanding of how the game has changed and how the college football landscape has changed. When you look at the Auburn job and the Ole Miss job side by side, maybe you're putting yourself in Lane Kiffin's shoes. How are you comparing and contrasting?
Well, there's a lot more crap to deal with at Auburn. I think that's the first thing you think about. But you also have to think about numbers that you maybe can't say no to. And that's somebody asked me in my mailbag a few weeks ago, would the law in Mississippi about the 4-year contracts, would that really matter? And I was like, no, I don't think it matters because you can win just about as many games at Ole Miss. You know, you're happy there. You're not dealing with all the extraneous stuff at Auburn, and they can continue to roll you over every year. But the more and more I think about that, if Auburn were coming with some sort of Godfather offer, and Richard, the story you broke today seems like a preemptive strike against that. But if Auburn comes in with something like, we're going to guarantee you $10 million a year for 8 years, fully guaranteed, or $10 million a year for 10 years, fully guaranteed, that's really hard to say no to. Really, really hard. Even though you know you're going to have to deal with some more crap. The thing is, though, if you end up having to deal with the crap, they're probably going to have to pay you all that money. So that's the other piece of it. But in terms of winning, and like, Ole Miss is in a better place than Auburn right now. Now, Auburn's ceiling, if you want to argue about ceiling, and I had some Ole Miss fans arguing with me about that on Twitter today. If you want to argue about ceiling from somebody who has no dog in the hunt, Auburn's ceiling is higher. Like, their ceiling this century is a national title. They have played for the SEC title 4 times this century. Ole Miss has never made the SEC championship game. Like, those are facts. They cannot be argued. But that said, if you look at where they are right now, the fact that divisions are going away, the fact that Auburn is going to have to play Alabama and Georgia every year still, and Ole Miss is not, that's something you got to consider. Like, it's going to get easier for Ole Miss.
Does the ceiling change with the 12-team playoff? Because historically, 100% you're accurate.
Like, Ole Miss is a 12-team playoff contender right now. Like, if there were a 12-team playoff, they would have made it last year, and they would be making it this year. But that doesn't make them a national title contender necessarily. Like, Georgia is the standard right now.
Sure.
If you think you can beat Georgia, if you have the roster that can compete with Georgia, you're a national title contender. There aren't many teams that can say that.
If you were in John Cohen's shoes as an athletics director that's been employed at Auburn for 2 weeks now, who would you be trying to hire?
Lane Kiffin, because I got to flip my roster immediately, and he's the best at that. So, and he also knows what he's getting into because he's recruited against Kirby, he's recruited with Kirby and Nick, he's recruited against Kirby and Nick. He understands how all that works. Now, if he tells me no, that's a different situation. That's a tough needle to thread because the key, like the most important facet of that job, is being willing to go head to head with Kirby Smart and Nick Saban in recruiting. And it's why when they hired Brandon Harsin, I was like, excuse me? What? And then as you watched him recruit in that first year on the job, you're like, oh my God, he does not understand the job he took. Like, did nobody tell him? Like, this is what you have to do? And so, who is that? Is that, do you go get Mark Stoops, who may be hitting a ceiling at Kentucky?
Yeah.
Because I think he'd listen. So is it somebody like that? Is it, do you try to talk to Deion? Like, I would talk to Deion anyway, because like I just said, the number one requirement is being willing to go head to head with Kirby Smart and Nick Saban for players. He would do that. Now, I would want to know in vivid detail what's your staff going to look like. So then I can think about, okay, from an X's and O's standpoint, How's that going to be? And so, but I'd talk to him. I'd want to know. I'll tell you another guy I would call. He's going to say no, but I'd call him. Sam Pittman.
Really?
I like Sam Pittman a lot.
All right, there's one name that you didn't mention in there that a lot of people have thrown around, and that's Hugh Freeze.
I just don't know if they're going to go there. I think he could win there. I think he'd be great there. Everybody I talk to, I don't get the sense that they're going to go there.
All right, so Andy, let me spin it. Now, what I'm about to ask you is dangerous because Pete, you know as well as I do that people hear what they want to hear.
Let me throw one more out there before you ask. Let me throw one more out there because I've seen this mentioned not by anybody credible, but after last year, I just think it's interesting. Like I laughed when I saw it, and then I'm like, why am I laughing at this? I've seen things about Dabo in that job.
Yeah, I know.
And I'm like, Dabo ain't leaving Clemson for that job. And then I'm like, wait a second. If I had said this time last year that Lincoln Riley would be the head coach at USC or that Brian Kelly would be the head coach at LSU, you would have laughed at me.
Mm-hmm.
You would have thought I was crazy. So after last year, I realized I can't dismiss anything out of hand. But now go ahead and ask that question.
Well, and just to follow up on what you said there, in terms of a fit for Auburn and what Auburn values in its head coach,
$1,000,000,000%.
Dabo Swinney. Oh my goodness, yeah.
Well, what did Louis Grizzard say? What is Clemson if not Auburn with a leg?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. All right, so this is the dangerous one because people are going to hear what they want to hear. Not saying this is happening, but if, to your point a second ago, you're John Cohen and you try to go get Lane Kiffin, and that happens. Now put yourself in Keith Carter's shoes, and you've got to replace Lane Kiffin. Where's your direction then?
I'm calling Deion. Let's go. Let's do it.
Okay.
That's one call. Now, I'm going to make some other calls, too, because Ole Miss is a great job, and I think Lane Kiffin has shown you how to win there. He's shown you the blueprint in this era. So, you know, you want to look around and see who's been really good in the portal. Now, I will say it doesn't necessarily have to come down to that. I would also look at people who've been winning. There's a guy who wins like crazy, who for whatever, well, I know the reason, and I'll tell you the reason. Who his name is not getting brought up in any serious circles for some of these jobs. Jamie Chadwell at Coastal Carolina should have been hired by Virginia Tech last year. They didn't call him. From what I'm hearing, Georgia Tech has not reached out.
By the way, Michael Borky is dancing in his chair right now as you say this because he's a huge Jamie Chadwell
Tech
stan.
Should have made their first and only call to Jamie Chadwell. He would have taken it. And so I guess they still can. But the fear is he's never been a Power 5 recruiter. He was a head coach at Division II, FCS head coach, now FBS head coach in the Group of Five. But he's never been a Power 5 recruiter. He would like to keep his staff together, and those people have not worked in the Power 5 for the most part. And I think that is the fear with most of these athletic directors about calling him. But he runs an offense that is triple option based, but is not the triple option. So you can recruit D linemen because you won't be like, oh, you're getting cut every play at practice. Very quarterback friendly. They don't throw 50 times a game, but when they do throw, the defense is so terrified of what they're going to do on the ground that the quarterbacks tend to be very efficient. Grayson McCall led the country in yards per attempt last year, and he's in the top 10 this year. So I would say hire that guy. I mean, that is I would call him, bring him on campus, and be like, what do you think? Let's do this. But I also, again, same reason I said Auburn should call Deion, Ole Miss should call Deion. Look at the level of player he's been able to get at Jackson State.
Yeah.
He can build a hell of a roster. And then, again, same question.
And probably maintain a roster, right?
Correct. And Keith Carter, same question that John Cohen would ask. I need to know what your staff looks like. I need to know exactly who's going to be where. Who you have coaching DBs? Who do you have coaching quarterbacks? Who's your OC? Who's your DC? And it's got to be plausible. It can't be a pie in the sky. Here's who I think I'm going to get. I've talked to these guys. They're coming. And if those answers are satisfactory, then absolutely he should be a serious candidate.
It's going to be interesting to see how the next week and a half plays out in the states of Mississippi and Alabama. Andy,